I don't choose these stories. They find me. Listen carefully. I arrived in Mindanao as a guest, not an investigator. A wealthy family involved in agriculture and shipping had invited me to stay in their ancestral home. An old Spanish-era mansion perched above the water, its walls lined with Cape-high shell windows that glowed like lanterns when the moonlight hit them. I thought the most unusual thing I would encounter, there was the sound of the surf echoing through the long wooden hallways. But on my first evening, during a late dinner, the family asked if they could speak to me privately. Their daughter, they said, had been having night terrors. She claimed that 3 severed heads, each dragging what seemed to be organs behind, were coming to her bedroom window after midnight. They believed it was stress, imagination, teenage anxiety. Psychologists confirmed she was totally well mentally, until the house staff saw something too. 3 shapes, 3 glints of wet tissue, hovering outside the second floor. They didn't want a priest. They didn't want the neighbors talking. They wanted someone who wouldn't panic. I spoke with the girl the next morning. She was quiet, thoughtful, the type who tries not to trouble her family. She told me the faces were all different. One older, one younger, one distorted by something she couldn't name. She said there was a smell of iron and salt, as if they'd risen straight out of the ocean, and their organs made a faint buzzing sound, like a cluster of insects trying to communicate. But what unsettled her most wasn't their appearance. It was the feeling that they weren't simply looking at her. They were evaluating her, measuring something, deciding. When I spoke to the household staff, their descriptions varied, but all of them mentioned movement. Those floating shapes correcting their position as if guided by invisible threads, drifting silently against the glass. I didn't know what to believe, but that night I stayed awake, and I watched. They came just before dawn, 3 pale heads rising from the garden like lanterns dragged upward by their own organs. Their eyes were open, alert, aware, and the long trails of viscera beneath them pulsed with slow, deliberate contractions, folding and unfolding like gills. They hovered level with the girl's window, and for a moment I thought they were drifting randomly. But then I heard it, short hissing bursts, almost imperceptible. Not breathing, not gasps, a pattern, communication. When they noticed me standing there, their movements shifted, all 3 aligned, facing the window as one. The girl was asleep behind me, unaware. I stepped back, and the heads retreated slowly, like creatures that didn't want to break eye contact. It was not a hallucination, not folklore, not metaphor. They were real, and they were learning. I decided to try something, the typical scientific approach that I have used time and again in other similar cases. I went to set up ultrasonic devices around the balcony, calibrated nets, low-light cameras, audio sensors, everything that could give structure to a situation that had none. For nights, nothing happened. Then one evening, just past 2 in the morning, the ultrasonic field trembled with interference. The air vibrated. The security guard beside me grew nauseous, and the 3 heads appeared, not at the window, but in the garden, hovering just beyond the range of every trap I'd set. They drifted back and forth, testing something, testing the boundaries. The next night, they stayed even farther out. The night after that, they did not appear at all. They had learned the edges of the net, and they had adapted. 6 months passed. I had returned to another country, another investigation, and I admit, forgotten about the floating entities. Then, one night, I received a short message from the mother. They're back. When I returned to Mindanao, the girl was paler than before, thinner, exhausted by something she couldn't articulate. This time, the heads were bold. They approached the window in broad patterns, circling in a slow triangle. The girl said she could feel them inside her mind, not as words, but as impulses, as if someone were trying to gently push her toward the window, to still her, to position her. The family was desperate enough to consider an exorcism, but I needed something more concrete. I abandoned traps. I went for force. Using a compressed air injector, I prepared a dart loaded with enough anesthetic to tranquilize a panther. When the three beings appeared, they approached in a rotating triangle, their organs moving in synchronized pulses. It was like watching a single intelligence wearing three masks. I fired once, missed. Fired again, grazed one. The third dart struck the base of its skull. The head sagged. Its organs went slack. The other two emitted a piercing sound, high, metallic, furious, and fled into the darkness so fast it was as if the night swallowed them whole. We carried the unconscious specimen inside. It was sedated, thus biological. It made a soft, regular hissing, but I could not detect from which part it was coming from. None of us believed we were going to survive what came next. We took it to a private lab at one of the pharmaceutical factories owned by the family. The research staff there expected something anatomical, something explainable. What they found defied classification. The organs were fused, spiraled, and arranged in patterns that made no anatomical sense. No lungs, but air sacs. No single brain, but clusters of nerves woven through the tissue like a net. Human-like skin layered over something older, something that resembled marine biology more than anything terrestrial. We extracted tiny samples. We documented everything. Then the lights flickered, and the thing opened one of its eyes. The containment box buckled outward as if hit by a car. Instruments crashed. Power died. When the lights came back on, the specimen was gone. Only fluids and torn fragments remained, along with a faint burn mark on the metal. A mark shaped almost like a handprint, even though there were no hands to leave it. From the fragments we recovered, the results were impossible. Some DNA sequences were human. Others were not found in any known organism. Some cells followed human replication. Others formed triple helix structures that should not exist in biology at all. The organ tissue behaved like regenerative marine life. The nerve networks behaved like a distributed brain, and the skin behaved like a disguise. It was a creature built to detach, to fly, to maneuver, to adapt, not a human distorted, but something else wearing humanoid shapes. The question the family feared most was the one I could not answer. Why their daughter? Theories formed and dissolved as quickly as they came. Perhaps they were following a bloodline. Perhaps they targeted individuals at a certain age, hormone profile, or emotional state. Perhaps the girl emitted some signal she wasn't aware of, something that called to them. Or perhaps the thing we tranquilized had started something that the other two needed to finish. I told the family none of this. Some truths only terrify without helping. An old Malaysian lady from the house service mentioned a word she probably heard from her family, probably back to ancestors lost in time. Just softly, just humble, but with a very secure expression, Penanggalan. I left the house weeks later. The girl seemed stable again. The things did not return, at least not while I was there. But the truth is, I never felt they had finished whatever brought them to that window. I don't think they were hunting her. I don't think they were tormenting her. I think she was needed for something they were preparing for. Something interrupted when we captured one of them. And I have learned this much. Creatures that adapt, that quickly never stop trying. Whether they return one last time, the family never said, and I never asked. The case ends here, for now. Reality bends more easily than people can imagine.